Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Today we are going to talk about the shad spawn. This is a key time when you can target bass, and basically, guys, anytime you've got a shad spawn going on, you know you're in the right place for bass. If there's a shad spawn happening, there are going to be bass around. The key is, when does the shad spawn happen? Where does it happen? And what baits do you want to throw to mimic those shad as they're spawning? We're going to talk about all of those. Plus, I'm going to give you one additional tip for after the shad spawn dies out in terms of what you can do, because as soon as the shad spawn dies out, that doesn't mean it's over. It just means you have to adjust. Guys, we'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Mark Fisher Outdoors, everybody. I'm Mark Fisher, and we are talking about the shad spawn. So, guys, and again, I think some of you, obviously, we've all heard about it. I'm not sure everybody knows exactly when it happens, where it happens, and what to do to take advantage of it. So the shad spawn basically happens in lakes around the country at around the same time that the bass are spawning. So, if you're in a part of the country where the bass spawn in March, well, then the shad are probably going to start spawning around March as well. If it waits until April or May in your part of the country because you're up north, that's about when the shad spawn is happening. And as long as your lake has shad in it, there is going to be a shad spawn. And when that happens, that is a huge congregation of shad, which bass love, okay? Totally easy meal. And because it's right around the bass spawn, that puts the bass, especially post-spawn bass, in a position where they've got easy buffet lines to, take advantage of to kind of recuperate after the spawn. You absolutely want to take advantage of a shad spawn that's happening. Now, when is not only a matter of what month, but also the time of day. The shad spawn at night, which means that at 12 noon, more than likely, you should stop thinking about shad spawn because that's not going on anymore. It's not happening during the daylight hours. It happens during the nighttime. But what it does mean is early morning, in that first hour of daylight or so, you can take advantage of the shad spawn because they're still going to be spawning as the sun is coming up. So the first thing in the morning, you're looking for where do the shad spawn? Any hard surfaces. Rocky banks are 100%, the place to look. If you've got a rocky bank, a riprap bank, that is a number one place to look. Docks, boat docks can be a hard surface. I've literally seen shad spawning up against pontoon boat pontoons. And any hard surface, they can get in there. So the reality is that, yes, a riprap bank would be a good place to target shad spawners, but a marina would be a great place as well. Even reed heads is hard enough for them to spawn against. So any of those, what you would consider to be hard structures, that's where you're going to find these threadfin or gizzard shad spawning. And again, in the low light conditions. Again, you're looking for low light conditions, hard surfaces. And I will tell you another thing. When I was on Lake Eufaula, there was a riprap bank, and it was just lined with seagulls and herons, and I'm telling you, they were just going to town. You've got the shad spawning up along the rocks, you've got the herons feeding on them from the top, and you got the bass corralling them from the open water up along the rocks. It was a feeding frenzy, believe me. You want to look for those herons along the bank during that shad spawn. So we know what time of year, we know what time of day And obviously that time of day, guys, could get longer if you've got cloudy conditions. The other thing that I like to do is sun comes up in the east. So if I can fish an eastern bank, that's going to give me a little bit more of darkness because the sun's going to have to get up over the bank to start shining on that. So an eastern hard rocky bank is going to be my preference if I'm targeting a shad spawn. It's going to stay in the shade longer, and those shad are going to stay up, spawning up along that rocky bank a little bit longer than if you go over to the west side where the sun's starting to shine right off the bat. Let's talk about baits and the kind of baits that you want to throw. You're obviously going to imitate shad. So the very first thing that I'm going to throw is a spinnerbait. Willow leaf spinnerbait, imitating shad, white, a lot of the kind of translucent kind of colors, the sparkly kind of colors. That's what I want. I want to get the fish's attention, and a spinnerbait does that just fine. And it works perfectly for the kind of cover that you're looking for. Another bait that I have 100% had a huge ton of success with, especially on lakes like Pickwick and things like that, is just throwing a little Kitech on a core tackle tush rig. This thing just kind of swims through the water. You can swim it at different depths in the water column, up along riprap banks, under docks, things like that. And this is a killer when it comes to the shad spawn. A little Kitech on a tush rig. You can throw other baits as well, a topwater like a Zara Spook, a buzz bait. But again, you notice that everything that we're throwing is got that white to it, imitating that shad, that shad bait fish. And finally, I wouldn't be targeting a shad spawn without having a swim jig, a core tackle swim jig. Again, I love the core tackle swim jig. It's got that flashaboo in there that gives you that little bit of flash. Pair it with a Kitech on there, and you get that wobble and that tail action. And again, it's a great bait to throw when you're hitting that shad spawn. Now, guys, I told you I was going to give you a tip for when the sun comes up and those shads start to move down and stop spawning. Because again, they're only spawning in those darker conditions. Once the sun comes up, they stop doing that. And then they'll come back again the next day and so on. But during the daylight hours, they're not going to continue to spawn. They aren't moving far away, however, okay? And the bass aren't going to necessarily move far away. If you've got a rocky bank and those bass are up against the bank feeding on those spawning shad, well, when they stop spawning and when they're not up against the bank any longer, all those bass are going to do is slide back down. So now what would be a good technique would be you could either use your forward facing, or you could throw a drop shot, and you could be in that, say, 10 foot of water, 15 foot of water, where those bass have slid down off of that bank that they were feeding on the shad in the morning, and that's where they're going to go. They're not going to vacate the area completely, and it isn't going to be a feeding frenzy like you had, but those fish are still going to be in that general area, and it's a good way to directly after fishing, the first hour or two when you're fishing up tight to the bank, now you can slide off a little bit and still catch some of those fish that are just sliding down into a little different part of the water column. Guys, I hope this helps. Take advantage of the shad spawn. It is a key factor, and believe me, as a tournament angler, we're always looking at, is that a player in this tournament? Going to Hartwell, it might be. We'll have to see as we're going there, but pay attention to that. If your lake has shad, it's something you want to pay attention to. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in. Hey, if you felt like this information was helpful, please give it a like. Please share it with a buddy, and if you haven't, subscribe to the channel. We'd appreciate that. We'll see you again tomorrow for another episode of Mark Fisher Outdoors. Take care, everybody.